The first person I saw after 200 days pointed a rifle at my chest and asked me why I was crying. I hadn't even realized I was. My face was so stiff from wind and dust and cold that I thought the wetness on my cheeks was sweat. But when I lifted a hand and touched it, my glove came away damp, and I started laughing instead, which probably looked worse. I must have looked half feral to him anyway, beard grown and patchy and wild. Jacket stitched at the shoulder with fishing line. Backpack hanging open because one of the zippers had failed a month earlier. I was standing in the middle of a dead soybean field with my hands raised, laughing and crying at the same time, while the first human voice I'd heard in weeks came out of a concrete hatch in the ground and said, very calmly, "Take one more step and I will shoot you where you stand." What I remember most clearly is how ordinary he sounded. Not cruel, not panicked, tired, careful, like this was something he'd had to do before and didn't enjoy doing, but knew how. I stopped moving. The wind scraped the dry stalks around us. Somewhere far off, sheet metal banged against sheet metal in a slow, irregular rhythm that had become the soundtrack of the world. The man kept the rifle steady and looked me over from boots to face. "Are you alone?" "Yes." He didn't believe me, which I understood. On day 200, alone sounded as unlikely as safe. "Turn around." I did. Slowly. I turned in a full circle with my hands up. Beyond the field, the road was empty. The gas station half a mile south was still collapsed in the middle where the roof had burned through. The billboard above it had finally come down 3 weeks before, and I still kept expecting to see it every time I looked that way. The sky had that white, drained-out color it got in late afternoon now, as if even daylight had gotten thinner. Lift the backpack off with 2 fingers and drop it. I did that too. A canteen, a pry bar, 2 cans of beans, and a paperback swollen with rainwater were all I had in there that anyone could want. Shirt up, I exposed my stomach, ribs, the knife scar near my hip from years earlier. He was checking for explosives, I guess, or bite marks, or some sign that I belonged to a group he knew. In those months, people made up different kinds of fear depending on what had taken the people they loved. Disease, raids, contamination, government sweeps, gas pockets, bad rain. There had never been enough facts to keep the rumors from breeding. "Come closer," he said. 10 steps, no more. I took 10 steps. He studied my face, and something in his expression changed, not softened, shifted. He lowered the muzzle an inch. "How many days?" he asked. I almost said all of them. Instead, I said, I stopped marking at 183. Then I found a school calendar in a pharmacy. I counted forward from there. 200, give or take. He nodded like I'd answered the important part of a test. Then he looked back over his shoulder into the hatch and called down. "He's real." A voice from below answered. "Everybody's real." Another voice woman this time, older, said, "Ask him where he came from." The man with the rifle kept his eyes on me. "Where'd you come from?" "North side of Millhaven." "That town burned." "I know. How'd you get here?" "Walking." "Why here?" I opened my mouth, then closed it. "Because I was following a dog," I wanted to say. "Because I saw smoke 2 days ago and thought maybe it was a trick of the light. Because I was starving for the sight of laundry on a line or a boot print that wasn't mine. Because on day 197, I caught myself talking to the freezer section of an abandoned grocery store for almost an hour and realized that if I didn't find another person soon, something in me was going to give way. Instead, I just said, "I didn't know this was here." That seemed to be the first true answer he liked. He lowered the rifle completely and said, "No one does." Then he stepped aside, and I saw the hatch properly for the first time. It had been disguised once, maybe with planks and farm junk and brush, but the weather had shifted some of that. What was left was a square of concrete set into the ground behind the shell of an equipment shed, with steel doors open outward, and a ladder dropping into a shaft lined with yellowing paint. Warm air rose from it. Not fresh air exactly, but lived-in air. Cooked food, detergent, rust, old carpet, human bodies. It hit me so hard that my knees weakened. There were people below, many of them, from the sound, a clatter of dishes, a child laughing and then being shushed, a radio crackling somewhere, footsteps, a cough. I'd spent so long training myself not to hope that the feeling came almost like pain. The man slung the rifle and said, "My name's Owen. Before you ask anything, you need to understand something. You don't get to tell people about this place." I stared at him. "I haven't seen anyone in 43 days, I said. "Who exactly am I going to tell?" He held my gaze for a second longer, then said, "Good, come down." The ladder shook under my boots. Halfway down, the warmth wrapped around me enough that I felt how cold I'd been. At the bottom was a heavy blast door, standing open on hydraulic hinges. The room beyond it was bigger than it had any right to be. A poured concrete chamber with white walls gone cream-colored with age, industrial lights buzzing overhead, shelves of canned goods, cots folded against one side, a hand-painted sign that said, "Keep the door," sealed in red letters. Beyond that chamber, a hallway branched in two directions. And there were people. Not a handful. Not a desperate little group with hollow cheeks and wild eyes. People. A community. 20 at first glance, then more behind them. Clean clothes. Hair tied back. A teenager carrying a crate of potatoes. An elderly man with oxygen tubing resting beneath his nose, and a paperback in his hand. 2 little boys standing barefoot on the painted floor, peeking around an adult's legs at me like I was a bear that had wandered in from the woods. Someone had hung drawings on one wall, houses, stars, a dog with 6 legs, because children drew what they felt and not what they saw. I stopped just inside the door and forgot how to move. A woman in a navy sweatshirt stepped forward. She was maybe in her 60s, gray hair in a braid, face lean in a way that suggested she'd always been lean, not starved into it. She carried herself like a school principal or a nurse, someone people listened to. "I'm Ruth," she said. "You look like you might fall over." "I'm fine," I said, automatically. "You're not fine," she said, "but you're standing, which is good enough for introductions." She looked to Owen. "Any sign of others?" "No." She nodded once, then turned back to me. "Name?" "Eli." "You armed?" "Knife." "Pry bar." "Any fever?" "No." "Cough?" "Sometimes." Everyone coughs sometimes. One of the little boys was still staring at me with frank, almost rude fascination. He whispered to the other one, not quietly enough, "He looks like the before times." A ripple of embarrassed laughter moved through the room. I felt my face heat. Ruth said, "Ignore Benny. He thinks anything with a beard is ancient history." Then, with no ceremony at all, she put a hand on my arm and guided me deeper into the bunker, as if I had simply arrived late to a family gathering. There are certain luxuries that don't register as luxuries until they vanish. A chair with all 4 legs, soap that smells like lemons instead of chemicals, a towel that's dry all the way through, being asked whether you'd like more soup. I cried twice that first night. Once in the shower, because the water came out warm and kept coming for a full 3 minutes before thinning to a trickle. Once later, in the bunk room they gave me, because someone named Marta left a folded blanket at the foot of the cot and tucked a toothbrush into it, like that was an ordinary gesture and not an act of mercy large enough to break a person open. I slept badly anyway. Part of it was simple unfamiliarity. After months above ground, I'd gotten used to sleeping in broken bursts, with one hand near a weapon and my ears tuned for glass crunch, engines, rain on the roof, anything. Underground, the sounds were wrong. The ventilation hum never stopped. Pipes knocked in the walls. Somewhere down the hall, a baby fussed and was soothed. Doors opened and shut with muffled thumps. People moved even at night. People breathed. It should have been comforting. Instead, it made my brain stay half awake, as if safety itself were suspicious. The other reason I slept badly was that nobody seemed as relieved by me as I was by them. They were kind. That's important. Nobody threatened me again. Nobody took my things except to inventory them and hand them back. They fed me, found me clean socks, even gave me a notebook and pencil when I said I'd been keeping track of days. But under the kindness, there was caution. Conversations stopped a second too late when I entered a room. Children were steered gently elsewhere if I lingered in the common area. When I asked how many people lived there, answers got vague. When I asked what the bunker had been before, Owen said, government storage, and nothing else. When I asked if they had contact with anyone outside, Ruth's expression closed so neatly it was almost elegant. We focus on the people we can keep alive, she said. That was the end of that. By the third day, I knew the layout better. The bunker had 3 main corridors branching off the entry chamber. One led to sleeping quarters, small rooms with stacked bunks, a laundry alcove, 2 communal bathrooms. One led to the kitchen, pantry, clinic, generator room, and what had once been a conference room, but was now a schoolroom during the day and gathering space at night. The third corridor ended in a locked steel door with a keypad beside it and a sign that read "Authorized Access Only." Nobody had to tell me not to ask about that one. The way they passed it without looking told me enough. Life in the bunker ran on schedule. Breakfast at 7. Lessons for kids at 9. Maintenance tasks posted by lunch. Quiet hours after 8. They had enough power to keep lights on low, enough stored food to eat 2 decent meals and 1 thin one each day, enough medicine to keep Ruth and the medic, a former veterinarian named Paul, from improvising too much. They had a greenhouse room under grow lamps, where herbs and lettuce struggled bravely in raised beds. They had a freezer with precious little left in it. They had a ham radio set up in a side office, though nobody ever seemed to use it while I was around. They had rules, but not the kind horror stories love. Nothing sinister, nothing theatrical. Wash your hands before entering the kitchen. Announce when you're going up top. Never go up top alone. Conserve batteries. Tell someone if you feel sick. Don't lie about supplies. Don't shout in the hallways after dark, because the sound traveled and people needed sleep. And the longer I stayed, the more my gratitude became complicated by one ugly, stubborn fact. Something was wrong with them. It wasn't one thing. It was 100 tiny things that didn't fit together cleanly. The first was the head count. On day 4, while helping portion rice in the kitchen, I said to Marta, casual as I could, "So how many people are here now?" Marta was in her 40s, broad-shouldered, practical, with deep, chapped lines around her mouth, and a way of moving as if she had once done every task in a hurry for years, and was only recently learning she didn't have to. She was one of the few who talked to me without measuring every word. "Enough to make rice disappear faster than it should," she said. I smiled. 40? 50? She glanced toward the doorway. "Depends if you count babies." "Do you?" "Sometimes I don't count myself." It was a joke, maybe, but she never answered. The second thing was the children. There were more of them than I expected, 9, maybe 10 if you counted the infant. In a world like ours had become, children were statistical miracles. Yet these kids were not just alive. They were clean, mostly healthy, and weirdly sheltered. They drew trees and birthdays and pets. They argued over crayons. One little girl named June asked me if clouds still looked big above ground, in the careful voice of someone asking about a country she had never visited. She couldn't have been more than 6, which meant she remembered some of the old world, but only barely. When I asked where they all came from, the answers were again too smooth. Different places. We found each other. Some were already here. Already here when? With whom? Under what circumstances? Nobody said. The third thing was how often people listened for something I couldn't hear. A pause in conversation, heads lifting slightly, a stillness passing through the room like a change in barometric pressure, then relief, or disappointment, or sometimes a new tension I couldn't read. I noticed it in the kitchen first, then in the schoolroom, then during dinner when a spoon froze halfway to someone's mouth, and Owen turned his head toward the ceiling, eyes narrowed, before resuming his meal. "What is that?" I asked him afterward. "What is what?" "The thing everybody keeps waiting for." He held my gaze too long. "Nothing. People don't listen that hard for nothing." He shrugged. "When you've lived underground long enough, every noise sounds like the one that matters." It was a good answer. Maybe even true. It still wasn't the whole truth. I would probably have let all of it sit in that unresolved, uncomfortable space, if not for Chloe. I met her properly on day 6, though I'd seen her before. She was hard to miss once you noticed her late 20s, maybe 30, dark hair cut short with kitchen scissors, a white scar crossing one eyebrow, eyes that stayed fixed on people a second longer than politeness required. She worked mostly in the clinic and the laundry room, but she moved through the bunker with a kind of contained impatience, as if she was permanently in the middle of an argument no one else could hear. I was in the greenhouse room, kneeling beside the lettuce trays and trying not to kill anything, when she stepped in and shut the door behind her. "How long are you planning to stay?" she asked. It wasn't hello. I sat back on my heels. "I don't know. Is that a problem?" "It becomes one." "For who?" She crossed her arms. "Depends." I studied her face. "You don't want me here." "That isn't what I said." "It's close." She let out a breath through her nose. "You showing up complicates things." "Things like what?" She looked at the ceiling for a moment, then back at me. "When people have built their lives around a set of facts, a new person changes the geometry." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one you're getting from me right now." She started to leave, then paused, with her hand on the door handle. "Did they tell you there are places in this bunker you're not allowed to go?" "Yes." "Did they tell you why?" "No." "Then here's free advice. Stop asking questions like someone who still thinks answers make people safer." She left me with that. That night I lay awake, staring at the underside of the bunk above mine, listening to the vent hum and someone softly snore down the row, and realized something that made my stomach turn. I hadn't been rescued. I had been admitted. The difference mattered. A rescue is about your need. Admission is about theirs. Once I thought that, I started seeing it everywhere. Ruth's careful kindness, Owen's watchfulness, the fact that they'd given me useful work almost immediately, instead of letting me recover in peace, the way certain rooms were always staffed by the same people, the way the radio office was never empty, but never active in public, the way Chloe watched not just me, but everyone, as if she were waiting for a piece of truth to slip. On day 8, I got my first glimpse beyond the locked door. Not because I was snooping, because Benny ran. He was one of the boys who'd stared at me on my first day. 7 years old, all elbows and bad impulse control. He liked to race toy cars down the slope of the main corridor and then deny he'd done it when they clattered into someone's ankles. That afternoon, he slipped out of the schoolroom while Marta was dealing with a nosebleed and took off down the 3rd corridor at full speed, laughing. I was coming the other way with a crate of canned peaches and saw him bolt. "Benny," I called. "Wrong way." He ignored me. Kids ignore the wrong adults first. By the time I caught up, he had reached the locked door just as it was opening from the inside. The gap widened, and for one strange half-second, I saw a room beyond, larger than anything else in the bunker, high ceiling, old fluorescent panels, rows of shelving, and at the far end, something that looked unmistakably like a wall of monitors. Then a woman I'd never seen before stepped into the doorway, grabbed Benny by the shoulders, and pulled him out. She was tall, black, probably in her 50s, wearing coveralls and a lanyard with keys. Her expression when she saw me was not fear. It was annoyance sharpened by alarm. "This corridor is restricted," she said. I was stopping him. "Congratulations." She pushed the door shut with one hand. I caught a glimpse of a second person inside, maybe a man, turning away quickly. Then the door sealed with a heavy click. Benny was wriggling, trying to make the game continue. "I wasn't going in," he whined. "I was just looking." The woman crouched to his eye level. "And what do we do when we're curious about things that aren't ours?" Benny muttered. "We leave them alone." Try sounding convinced. "We leave them alone." She straightened and looked at me. "Who are you supposed to be?" "Eli." She nodded once, as if she had heard of a shipment arriving late. "I'm Dana. Next time, stop him sooner." Then she walked Benny back toward the main rooms, without another word. That evening I asked Marta who Dana was. Marta was peeling potatoes. The knife paused in her hand. "She handles systems." "What systems?" "The ones keeping us alive." "Was she here before?" "She was here when she needed to be." I gave up. That same night, Chloe found me again. There was a maintenance closet near the laundry room where people sometimes went to cry in private, or kiss, or be alone for 5 minutes. I was in there because I'd volunteered to sort batteries and got distracted by the rare pleasure of silence. Chloe slipped in and closed the door behind her. "You saw the annex," she said. I stared. "The what?" "Don't play stupid." "The room behind the locked door?" Her mouth twitched. "You really are new." "What is it?" She leaned against the shelves and studied me. In the cramped light, her face looked older, more tired. "Before everything fell apart," she said, "this place wasn't storage. It was continuity infrastructure." That means nothing. It means a bunker full of mid-level systems, staff, supplies, comms equipment, and enough redundancy to keep certain county functions alive if there was a national emergency. I laughed once without humor. That sounds made up. It does. County functions? Like what? Taxes during the apocalypse? Records, communications, utilities, emergency routing, population data, resource coordination, the boring arteries of civilization. Something cold moved through me. "And you all just happened to end up here?" "No," she said. "Some of them were assigned here. Some were family. Some were added after. Some were never supposed to be." "Which are you?" "After." She pushed off the shelves. "You need to understand the real problem, Eli. The bunker isn't secret because it exists. It's secret because it still works." I said nothing. The surface doesn't look like government anymore, so people assume government is gone. But pieces of it held on in places like this. Small pieces, fragments, enough to make lists, enough to decide priorities, enough to answer one radio and ignore another. I felt suddenly, vividly, that I was standing on rotten floorboards. "You said still works." "Works doing what?" Chloe's expression shifted into something I can only call pity. "Deciding who gets let in," she said. Then she left. I didn't sleep at all that night. Once the thought took shape, everything rearranged around it. Not chaos. Not random survivors clinging together beneath a field. Selection. Who came in? Who stayed out? Who was worth the calories, the medicine, the oxygen, the risk? I wanted to reject it on principle. The world had broken in 100 ways. Of course, people had to make terrible decisions. That didn't mean conspiracy. It meant scarcity. It meant survival. But by dawn, I had 2 memories I couldn't stop turning over. The first was my arrival, Owen, asking how many days. Not if I was hurt. Not where my family was. Days. As if duration mattered to a process he already knew. The second was a conversation I'd overheard in the clinic my 3rd day there. Ruth telling Paul, if he makes it through the week, that changes the equation. At the time, I thought she meant my health. Now I wasn't sure. On day 9, they sent me above ground with Owen and Marta to strip copper wire from an abandoned machine shed 2 miles east. It was my first time leaving since arrival, and the sky felt obscenely large after so many days underground. March was coming apart into a wet, mean spring. The fields were rutted with old tractor lines full of brown water. The trees at the edge of the road still looked dead, until you got close enough to see tiny green, insisting at the tips. Traveling with other people was harder than I expected. I kept wanting to widen distance, vary pace, check our back trail. Owen moved like someone who had long ago accepted risk as a weather condition. Marta hummed under her breath while she worked. They made a clean team. Efficient. Wordless when they needed to be. The kind of competence that either comes from long practice or from being too tired to waste anything, including syllables. Halfway back, carrying the stripped wire in coils, we passed a church parking lot I'd crossed alone a month before. There had been a hand-painted sign near the road then. Help. 11. Inside. On my first pass, I hadn't gone near it. I had 1 can of peaches, a bad cough, and no illusions about my ability to save 11 strangers. On my second pass, days later, the sign was gone, and the doors were open, and there was nothing inside, except overturned folding chairs and a smell like wet plaster and old panic. Now, as we passed, I saw fresh boot marks in the mud by the entrance. I stopped. Owen turned. "Keep moving." "Someone's been here." "Yes." My grip tightened on the wire. "Recently." "Yes." Marta wouldn't meet my eyes. I said, "Did you come here?" "No," Owen said. The lie was so flat it almost shocked me. "How many did you take?" His face hardened. "Move." I didn't. Maybe exhaustion had made me stupid. Maybe safety had made me brave, in the worst possible way. There were 11 on the sign. That sign was months old. So maybe there were fewer. Maybe there were 6. Maybe there was 1. I heard my own voice rising. "How many did you take?" Owen stepped closer until we were almost chest to chest. "We do not discuss field decisions out here." "Field decisions?" "Yes." "Like triage?" "Yes." The word landed between us with brutal clarity. I looked at Marta. She looked away. Somewhere in the church, a loose door bumped faintly. I said, much more quietly, "How many did you leave?" Owen's face didn't change, but something in him withdrew. "Keep moving," he said again. "Or stay, but choose now." So I chose badly. I walked. We made it back to the bunker before dark. Nobody spoke about the church. At dinner, Benny dropped a spoon and burst into tears because children always sense the atmosphere before they understand it. Ruth excused him with too much gentleness. Chloe didn't look at me once. Dana passed through the common room carrying a clipboard and a hard case, heading for the annex. I kept hearing the phrase, field decisions. Not rescue. Not refusal. Decisions. That night I went to Ruth. She was alone in the clinic, inventorying gauze by lamplight because power was lower after 8. The little room smelled of antiseptic and dry cotton and the mint tea she always drank. She looked up when I entered, saw my face, and put the box down. "So," she said, "it's reached you. You let people die out there." She held my gaze. "Sit." I stayed standing. She sighed softly. "Sit. Anyway." I sat. For a few seconds, only the vent hummed. Then Ruth said, "What do you think the word let means, Eli?" I stared at her. She folded her hands. "Do you think we have infinite room? Infinite antibiotics? Infinite fuel? Filters? Insulin? Calories? Patience? Luck? Do you think because you found us, we became morally obligated to become a doorway for the whole county?" "That's not what I said." "No, you said the cleaner version. People always do." Anger rose in me, but underneath it was shame, because some part of me had already asked myself the same question and not liked the answer. Ruth went on. "At the beginning, we brought in everyone we could reach. It nearly killed all of us, not because people were bad, because people are hungry and sick and afraid and carry whole chains of consequence behind them. One person means a child, a spouse, a diabetic father, a wound you can't treat, a feud with another group, a cough that becomes 12 coughs, a lie told because someone wants their daughter admitted too. Her voice never rose. That made it worse. We lost more in the first 27 days from generosity without procedure than from anything above ground. I said, procedure. Yes, you turned surviving into paperwork. We turned it into continuity. I laughed sharply. That's a nice word. It's an accurate word. She leaned forward. You think cruelty wears a dramatic face. Most of the time, it looks like refusing to pretend resources are larger than they are. I said nothing. She studied me with something close to sorrow. You want this to break cleanly into villains and innocents, she said. It won't. That's one of the luxuries that ended. Then she added, you were admitted because Owen believed you could live here without destroying what kept others alive. That is the only honest answer I can give. Based on what? My beard? Based on the fact that you came alone, carried no infection we could see, showed no signs of organized violence, had already survived long enough to understand scarcity. And, she paused, because you did not ask about your place in line before asking where the bathroom was. I stared at her. She almost smiled, but didn't. People reveal themselves quickly, she said. I left the clinic feeling less vindicated than contaminated, because the worst part was that I understood her. Not agreed. Understood. The next days were harder. The bunker had seemed like salvation when I entered it, then a puzzle. Now it was something worse than either, a functioning moral compromise. A place where people had done ugly things for reasons that were not entirely ugly, and then built daily life on top of those decisions, until the life itself became evidence in their defense. That is much harder to hate than monsters. I started noticing the adults who never looked at the outer hatch when it opened, the people who went quiet whenever new boot prints were reported on the road above, the little habits of not knowing that let a person keep making breakfast for children. I also started noticing Chloe was right about one more thing. The bunker still worked. Not perfectly, not like the old world. But on day 12, I was helping Dana replace a filter cartridge in the generator room when a coded burst came through the wall speaker. Dana froze, wiped her hands, and crossed into the annex without telling me to stay put because she'd forgotten I was there. The door didn't fully close behind her. I stood where I was for maybe 10 seconds. Then I did exactly what any trustworthy person would not do. I looked. The annex was not one room. It was a whole secondary operations space tucked behind the public face of the bunker. Banks of old equipment, shelving full of binders and plastic tubs, a county map on one wall covered with pins and grease pencil marks, 3 powered monitors showing lines of data I didn't understand, and 1 live camera feed of the field above us, wind moving through dead grass. There was a radio desk with multiple handsets, not just the ham setup in the side office. And above the map, in black marker on a whiteboard, were 2 columns. Active. Viable. Under each were place names. Churches, farmhouses, a school, a water tower station, a mobile home park, the pharmacy where I'd found the calendar. Next to some names were numbers. Next to others were slashes. Next to a few was a single letter, N. Dana saw me before I could step back. For 1 second, we just looked at each other. Then she said, incredibly calmly, since you're already being stupid, you might as well come in and see the rest. I did. Up close, the map was worse. Not because it was gruesome, because it was clerical. The handwriting was neat, updated, human beings rendered as estimates and thresholds, viability by location, resource drain, access risk. Some sites apparently monitored for weeks before any contact. Some crossed off entirely. Near the bottom corner of the board was a phrase underlined twice, holding capacity reached. I swallowed. How long have you been doing this? Since before you got here. Since before Chloe. Since before half the people you know. Dana didn't sound ashamed. She sounded exhausted. Don't flatter yourself into thinking discovery changes the machinery. What does active mean? We've confirmed someone is still there. Viable? Potential for integration. I looked at her. Potential. Yes. Based on what? Health, behavior, group size, existing dependence, skill set, travel feasibility, whether they're likely to lead others back, whether bringing them in would kill 3 people to save 1, whether leaving them a supply drop creates a future problem larger than the present mercy. I heard my own voice go thin. You monitor people and decide whether they deserve to join you. We monitor people and decide whether the bunker survives. That's the same sentence with cleaner shoes. She gave a tired little nod. Sure. I pointed at a circled location on the map. The church? Her face didn't change. 7 when last confirmed, she said. 1 insulin dependent, 2 minors, 1 leg injury, 1 probable respiratory infection, no transport. Admitted 1 child and the insulin-dependent adult after reassessment. The rest refused separation at first contact. By second contact, conditions had changed. My mouth went dry. You took them apart. We offered survivable numbers. Families. Yes. I stared at the map until the pins blurred. Dana's voice softened, but not enough to be kind. You think the evil part is that we chose. The evil part was being in a world where no choice remained innocent. That might have been the line I was supposed to carry with me forever. But what I actually carried was something else. One of the locations on the board was circled 3 times in red. Millhaven North. My town. Next to it. Active, then later N, then later active again, and beneath that, written smaller than the rest. Possible signal. Female. West subdivision. My sister Lena had lived in the West subdivision. I don't remember deciding to move. I only remember my hand hitting the edge of the desk so hard a pencil cup tipped over. What is this? I said. Dana looked at the line, then at me, and for the first time I saw real alarm in her. That board is not for public. What is this? She exhaled slowly. An unconfirmed signal from weeks ago. From who? We don't know. Why wasn't I told? Because it was unconfirmed. My sister lived there. She closed her eyes briefly, which told me everything. They had known that too. When? I asked. No exact date. Intermittent light source observed from the West subdivision over 2 nights. Then, nothing. Later, a short radio fragment. Female voice, weak transmission, no clear identification. The room felt suddenly airless. You sent no one? She said nothing. You sent no one. We had 2 people down with fever, 1 generator fault, a surface conflict east of Route 9, and no confirmation it was even live human contact. You made a decision. Yes. I don't remember crossing the room. One moment I was by the whiteboard, and the next, Dana's back had hit a storage cabinet because I'd shoved her with both hands. Not to hurt her, to make the world jolt, to make some buried part of the bunker crack open and admit what it was. People came running. Owen first, then Ruth, then Chloe from somewhere behind them. Taking in the scene in one sweep the tipped cup, Dana braced against the cabinet, my hands shaking so badly I could barely feel them. Nobody grabbed me. That somehow made it worse. I said, to all of them, "You left her there." Ruth's face changed in an instant. Not confusion, recognition. She knew exactly which her I meant. That was the worst moment of all. Not the rage, the confirmation. "You knew," I said. Ruth looked ancient suddenly. "Eli, you knew. We knew there might have been someone. You knew it could be Lena." Silence. Owen stepped between me and Dana, but he did it gently, like handling a wounded animal. "This is not the place." "No," I said. "The place was Millhaven." I think I expected shouting then. Defense. Authority. Instead, Chloe said, very quietly, Now you know why I asked how long you planned to stay. No one tried to stop me when I left the annex. They probably knew there was nowhere for me to go except out or back to my bunk, and back to my bunk was not happening. I went up top alone after curfew with a flashlight, my pack, 2 days of food I stole from the pantry, and enough anger to keep me warm. Maybe they could have physically restrained me. Maybe Owen could have caught me before I cleared the hatch. But he didn't. At the surface, I turned once. He was standing below in the ladder shaft, one hand on the rung, face pale in the beam. "You won't make it there and back in one push," he said. "I'm not coming back." He accepted that too fast. "Take the water tablets from the side pouch." I almost laughed. Then he said, "If she's alive, bring her to the Blue Grain elevator south of Fairbrook. 3 nights from now, midnight. Come alone." That stopped me. Why would I trust you? Because if I wanted you dead, I wouldn't be giving you the meeting point. I stared at him. The wind moved over the field behind me. At last I said, "Why didn't you go?" His face did something I still think about. Not hardening, not breaking, simply giving up on appearance. "Because I was tired of choosing strangers over the people already breathing in front of me," he said. Then I climbed out and pulled the hatch shut behind me. The road to Millhaven took me 2 days and a night by back routes. I knew every ditch and fence line by then, but memory only helps so much when your body is weaker than your mind admits. Rain caught me halfway there. I slept in an overturned boat behind an old feed store and woke with one hand still wrapped around the knife and my teeth chattering so hard my jaw ached. All the way south I kept telling myself not to build a person out of a signal, not to turn maybe into Lena, not to let hope get theatrical. Hope, in that world, was a bad navigator. But memory is cruelly efficient when it wants to be. I remembered Lena at 12 standing on our garage roof in socks because she was convinced she could fix the satellite dish herself. Lena at 24 refusing to leave Millhaven after Mom died because somebody should stay where things happened. Lena rolling her eyes at every man who tried to explain weather or engines to her. Lena's laugh coming through walls. By the time I reached the west subdivision, hope had become a fever. The houses there had taken less fire than the town center. Mostly water damage, wind damage, looting, front doors hanging open, a trampoline half in the street, mold climbing curtains. I moved carefully, checking corners, calling her name only twice because the sound of it nearly split me in half. I found the signal source near dusk. Not Lena. A battery lantern rigged in an upstairs window of the Holloway's split level, aimed outward with foil reflectors behind it. The radio in the bedroom was old but functional, wired into a tangle of scavenged batteries. On the wall beside it, in careful block letters, someone had written a transmission schedule and then crossed out days over and over until the lines became a dark knot. There was also a body. Female, maybe mid-50s, wrapped in a quilt on the bed. Dead long enough that grief had moved past horror into arrangement. The room had been put in order around her. A cup rinsed clean on the nightstand, shoes lined by the dresser, transmission logs stacked neatly in a crate. Her name, from an insurance envelope on the desk, was Anne Holloway. Not Lena. I sat on the bedroom floor and laughed once, because the alternative was worse. Anne's last transmission log was 9 days old. Several entries simply read, "No response." The one before that said, "Heard male voice. Too weak." Said, "Hold on." I stared at those words until the light outside changed. Hold on. For whom? From where? I searched the house at full dark and found the answer in the basement. Not Lena, but close enough to ruin me. Her jacket was there. The green canvas, one with the missing top button and the stitched elbow patch she used to hate, folded over the back of a chair beside a camp stove. On the table was a note in her handwriting. "Gone east with trucker named Sal. Said bunker rumors real near county line. Anne, if Eli comes through, tell him I didn't wait, because waiting felt like dying." No date, no destination more exact than that. Under the last line, pressed hard enough to tear the paper slightly. Tell him I was right to leave. I sat in that basement until the lantern upstairs died. I don't know how to explain what it feels like to lose someone twice in 200 days and have neither loss be clean. Relief and rage, gratitude and insult, love so intact it feels almost childish. She had been alive. She had searched. She had moved on. She had left a note that sounded exactly like her and made me want to hug her and shake her at the same time. Sometime in the night I realized something else. The bunker hadn't left Lena there. It had left a signal that might have led to Lena, after Lena was already gone. I had built my fury on an incomplete grave. That did not absolve them, but it changed the shape. I took the note, the jacket, one of Anne's radio logs, and at dawn I started for the grain elevator. The meeting place looked like every place left behind looked by then. Vast and skeletal and too quiet. The elevator rose out of flat land like a monument to a species that had trusted schedules and fuel. Midnight wind moved through broken siding and made it sound like whispering from a distance. I arrived early and hid in the shadow of an auger trailer with the knife across my lap, Lena's jacket beside me. Owen came alone. He approached in the open, flashlight angled down, no visible rifle. When he got close enough to see my face, he stopped. "She wasn't there," I said before he could speak. "But she was alive after your signal. She left." Something like relief crossed his face, so raw I almost hated him for it. "Good," he said. I laughed harshly. "That's all you've got?" "No." He took another step. "It's just first." I told him about Anne, the jacket, the note. I did not hand any of it over. He listened without interruption, hands visible, shoulders sagging in a way I had never seen underground. When I finished, he said, "Then there's a chance." "For Lena," I said, "not for your system." He nodded. We stood with the wind moving around us and mice rustling somewhere in the grain dust. Finally, I said, "Why did you really ask me here?" He looked up at the broken tower, then back at me. "Because we have a vote tomorrow," he said, "about whether the bunker stays what it is." I stared. "Dana wants tighter protocol," he continued. "Ruth wants no structural changes but more transparency. Chloe wants the map burned and the radios opened. Marta wants us to stop pretending we're administrators and admit we're just scared people with spreadsheets. He stopped. "What do you want?" He gave a small, bleak smile. "I wanted you to find your sister dead so I could keep thinking our decisions had cleaner edges." That was the first honest thing anyone had said to me in days. He went on, "Instead, you found a note, which means one person we did not prioritize still found a path, which means the model is wrong in ways that matter, not useless, wrong." I looked at him for a long time. "Why tell me?" "Because you've been on both sides of the hatch now." The wind shifted. Somewhere metal groaned. "And because," he said, "if the bunker changes, people will die from the changing. If it doesn't, people will die from that too. Someone should argue who remembers what the outside feels like." I laughed once, tired and bitter. "That's your pitch? Come back and help run the machine better?" "No," he said. "Come back and make it harder for us to hide inside our own language." I didn't answer. In the dark between us lay every church, farmhouse, radio call, and field decision. Also, soup, towels, children's drawings, insulin, heat. People who had already built one version of home out of catastrophe and were asking whether it could survive being made more honest. "You think that vote changes anything?" I asked. "It changes who we become while doing the same impossible math." That was such an infuriating, partial, adult answer that I nearly smiled. Instead, I said, "If I come back, the map goes on the wall where everyone can see it." He considered. "Maybe not everyone. Everyone old enough to understand that food has a cost." "Food." He nodded slowly. "And no more pretending selection is mercy." Another nod. "And if we hear Lena or anyone, and there's a real chance, I go." This time he didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Yes. I should tell you I made the right decision, because I knew immediately what was moral. I didn't. I sat on a broken pallet in the wind and thought about Anne Holloway alone in her room with the lantern, writing 'Hold on' to no one. I thought about Benny asking if clouds still looked big. I thought about Ruth counting gauze in a world where gauze had become political. I thought about Lena refusing to wait, because waiting felt like dying, which was exactly the sort of sentence she would leave me to live inside. At last I said, 'I'm not staying forever.' Owen's shoulders lowered by an inch. 'No one is. I mean it. I know. And if the vote goes the wrong way?' He looked at the dark horizon. 'Then maybe the bunker becomes one more place that survives by shrinking its soul. There are plenty of those.' That should have sounded noble or tragic. Instead, it sounded tired. Maybe that's why I believed him. We walked back together before dawn. The hatch opened to the same warm, lived-in air, the same painted walls, the same impossible fact of people making breakfast underground, while the world above stayed broken and cold. Benny was asleep on a chair in the common room with a book over his face. Marta was at the stove. Chloe stood by the annex door like she had been expecting footsteps all night. Her eyes went first to me, then to the green jacket in my hand. "She wasn't there," I said. Chloe nodded once, as if this hurt but did not surprise her. Ruth emerged from the clinic a moment later, taking us in. No one spoke for several seconds. Then I set Anne's radio log on the table. "Put the map in the common room," I said. Nobody moved. "Put it where people can look at the places and say the words out loud. Call it what it is, then vote on whatever you want. But no more clean language." Marta stopped stirring. Chloe's mouth twitched in something like approval. Dana, appearing silently from the corridor, looked at me with a kind of deep weariness that might have been contempt or respect. Ruth was the one who finally answered. "Eat something first," she said. I almost laughed. It was such a bunker thing to say, such a human thing. Argument can wait 5 minutes. Blood sugar cannot. So I sat. Marta put a bowl in front of me. Owen leaned his rifle by the wall and took a chair. Benny woke, blinked at the room full of adults, and instinctively understood something enormous was happening, though not what. And for the first time since I found the hatch in the field, the bunker did not feel like salvation, or prison, or secret government, or moral machine. It felt like what it had always actually been, a place full of survivors. Not better than other people, not worse, just more organized in their fear, more practiced at turning impossible choices into routines you could live beside. A place that might save you and betray someone else in the same week. A place where every kindness had a budget, and every budget had a grave behind it if you looked long enough. A place that could still, maybe, decide not to become smaller, just because shrinking was efficient. I wish I could tell you what the vote decided that morning. I wish I could say the map went up, and everyone agreed, and the bunker transformed into something pure. It didn't. People argued. People cried. Dana said transparency without discipline would kill children. Chloe said discipline without truth had already killed something worse. Ruth spoke last and longest, and with more visible age in her face than I had ever seen. At one point, Benny was sent out because he started crying just from the sound of adult voices stretched too tight. What I can tell you is this. The map did go up. Not forever, not unguarded, but long enough. Long enough for names to be spoken by people who had only known numbers. Long enough for a woman named Inez to point at the mobile home park and say her brother might have been there. Long enough for Marta to admit she had stopped asking where supply drops came from because asking made dinner harder to cook. Long enough for Dana herself, rigid and furious, to point at one circled farmhouse and say, very quietly, "We chose wrong there." Sometimes that is the largest change a place can bear at once. Not redemption, not collapse, a sentence no one can take back. We still make field decisions. We still count medicine and calories and risk. There is no miracle large enough to erase arithmetic. But now the language catches in our throats more often, which I think is a kind of progress. We listen to more radios. We argue sooner. We lie less elegantly. Sometimes we go out because a signal is weak and might be a stranger and might be no one. Sometimes we come back with someone, sometimes not. I stayed. Not because I forgave them, not because they deserved me, because Lena was right about one thing. Waiting feels too much like dying, and because leaving every compromised place does not produce a clean world. It only leaves the compromises to people less willing to name them. Some nights, I climb the ladder and stand in the field above the hatch and look east, where the roads thin out and rumors travel farther than trucks ever did. I wear Lena's jacket when it's cold. Clouds are still big. June was right to ask. I talk to my sister sometimes, quietly, like she might be somewhere under the same weather. I tell her the bunker is trying, which is not the same as good, but better than pretending. I tell her Benny lost another toy car down a floor drain. I tell her Ruth finally let the kids draw on the blank side of old county forms. I tell her if she hears a radio and thinks it might be us, she should answer plain and not theatrical, because we've had enough of hidden things. And every time the hatch opens below me and warm air rises from underground, carrying soup and detergent and human voices into the dead field, I remember the rifle on my chest and Owen asking why I was crying. I know the answer now, because after 200 days alone, I had found a bunker full of survivors. And survival, it turns out, is not the opposite of horror. It is where horror goes when it learns to organize itself, set a table, keep children alive, and ask every single day what price it is willing to pay to remain human.